An old man sits outside a tent woven from rough goat hair, feeling the sharp bite of a cold wind in a world that is slowly breaking down, to explain how a human heart could keep pumping blood for 9 centuries. But when you treat the text like a medical record, the 800 is not a measure of what a man can accomplish. It is a measure of what God can sustain. But Adino's terrifying victory is over in a single, blood-soaked afternoon. He can finally drop his spear, wash his hands, and rest. The ancient patriarchs had no such relief. They had to wake up and fight their battle, every single day, generation after generation, while the sky grew darker and the violence around them multiplied. And that echo does not stop there, because it forces us to confront a terrifying reality about how God operates in the waiting. We are a species obsessed with efficiency. We measure our lives in financial quarters, in next-day deliveries, in the frantic swiping of glass screens. When we encounter a problem, we demand an immediate intervention. When we read the early chapters of Genesis, our modern minds instinctively rebel against the sheer volume of time. We want God to work on our rapid-fire schedule. We want the flood to happen in the 3rd chapter, right after Cain's heavy stone crushes Abel's skull, to wash the blood away and reset the board immediately. You completely miss the architecture of what the author is building. These numbers are not a biological anomaly. They are a theological warning. But the God of the ancient text operates with an agonizing patience. The 800 years establish a theological framework for how the divine handles human rebellion. Look at the physical toll of that waiting. Picture the tendons in a father's hands, growing thick and knotted from centuries of pulling thorns. From the dry lod, unyielding soil. Imagine the staggering number of graves a man like Seth had to dig. The awful sound of shoveling dry earth over the lifeless bodies of his great-great-grandchildren. They are dying of a disease they inherited. And the cure is nowhere in sight. God does not rush the process of redemption. He allows the consequences of Eden to fully ripen. He allows the darkness of the ancient world to reach its absolute, terrifying zenith. Until the text says, "The thoughts of the human heart are only evil continually." This is not divine negligence. It is the exhaustion of human autonomy. If God had cracked the sky open in the days of Enosh, the human race could have argued the judgment was premature. They could have claimed that given enough time, they would have built a utopia of bronze and iron, that the violence in the valleys was just a temporary phase of societal growth. The 8 centuries are the brutal, undeniable proof that humanity cannot cure its own heart. God gives the world enough time to prove. The real question of the ancient calendar isn't, how did they survive so long? It's this: why did God make them wait so long? That independence from the source of life is a dead end. But he also gives them a living, breathing hourglass. Remember the name of Enoch's boy, Methuselah. When he dies, it is sent. For nearly a millennium, every time that man coughed, every time he grew weak with a winter fever, every time his breathing grew shallow in the dark of his goat hair tent, the righteous remnant knew the clock was ticking down. The warning was not a hidden secret kept in the heavens. It was walking around the camp. It was sitting by the fire. It was visibly aging, his hair thinning, his skin wrinkling, slowly and inevitably approaching the edge of the grave. But Methuselah does not live forever. There comes a day when the coughing ceases. The breathing finally stops, and an old man closes his eyes for the last time. The old man takes his final breath. His chest stops moving. His lungs empty for the last time. Methuselah is dead. The name is triggered. When he dies, it shall be sent. They wash the fragile body. They fold the rough linen. They carry him to the grave. The dry dirt hits the burial shroud with a heavy, hollow thud. This is not a random list of extraordinary lifespans. It is a profound diagnosis of divine patience. We are looking at a world where violence is multiplying exponentially. The mourners weep in the dust. They wipe their eyes. They walk back to their tents. They light their fires. They eat their meals. They expect tomorrow to look exactly like today. They do not look at the sky. But the sky is changing, The bright blue stretches into a deep, bruised purple. The air grows thick and heavy. The wind shifts abruptly. The sharp smell of ozone hangs in the valleys. The temperature plummets. A man named Noah walks up a massive wooden ramp. He leads his family inside a pitch-covered vessel. The wood groans under the shifting weight. The animals pace in the dark shadows. Noah does not close the massive wooden door. He cannot. The text says, God himself shuts him in. The heavy latch drops. The silence falls. The waiting is over. The cosmic clock hits 0. 8 centuries of delay snap like a taut bowstring. The first drop of water hits the cursed ground. It is freezing. It is heavy. It shatters the dry dust. Then another drop falls. Then 100. Then 10,000. Then the sky rips open. A deafening roar vibrates through the floorboards of the ark. The fountains of the great deep crack apart. The ground violently splits beneath the feet of the violent men. Cain has murdered Abel. Lamech is forging weapons of bronze and iron, singing poetic songs by the fire about killing young men for merely striking him. Black. Freezing water erupts upward from the rock. The windows of the heavens give way. The rain does not merely fall. It crushes. It obliterates. It swallows the mountains. This is not a sudden outburst of divine anger. It is the terrifying precision of a promise kept. The ancient world is drowning in the exact judgment they spent 800 years ignoring. The long, agonizing grace period is entirely exhausted. The 8th day of creation has arrived, and it is washing the slate clean. For centuries, the patriarchs lived out their heavy 800-year blocks. Staring down this exact horizon, Adam watched the shadow build. Seth carried the agonizing weight of the delay. Jared stood at the numerical threshold. Methuselah held the door open with his very breath. And now, Noah rides the breaking wave. The 8 centuries of gestation are complete. The old world is completely submerged. But the narrative does not end in the black water. Because when the rain finally stops, and the ark finally grinds to a halt on wet rock, you have to look at what the 800 years actually produced. Adam lived 8 centuries in the dust and established the agonizing pattern of the weight. Seth buried his children for 800 years. The earth is filling with blood. The shadows are stretching longer across the valleys. And the human family is fracturing, and proved that humanity could not cure its own curse. Enoch gave his son a prophetic name and turned a passive timeline into a terrifying countdown. Methuselah held the door open with his very breath and bought a violent world one more day of mercy. Noah survived the crushing black rain and stepped out into the bright light of an 8th-day creation. Adino the Esnite swung a heavy bronze spear against 800 men and proved that natural limits bend to a divine spirit. And a savior stepped out of a borrowed tomb on the first day of a new week and inaugurated an 8th day that will never end. One thread. One story. But here's the part I keep coming back to. Not just the sheer, crushing weight of the ancient math, or the terrifying precision of Methuselah's name. It is the image of a father's hands, tendons thick and knotted from centuries of pulling thorns from an unyielding soil, waiting for a promise that refused to arrive on his schedule. The 800 years were not an accident of ancient biology. They were a divine incubator. If you are in a season where the delay feels like a punishment, where the sky is silent and the ground is hard, you have to look at what God is actually doing in the waiting. We want the flood on day 3. We want the immediate rescue. And in the middle of all that escalating darkness, you have this repeating, haunting baseline. 800 years. But your unanswered prayer is not a rejection. It is a gestation. God is not ignoring the exhaustion of your circumstances. He is using the tension of the 8th century to push your natural capacity to its absolute breaking point, so that when the threshold is finally crossed, it is entirely His strength holding the spear. And may the God who has never once rushed a resurrection walk with you through your agonizing wait and bring you out onto the wet rock of a brand new world. 8 centuries of watching the rot spread. 8 centuries of waiting for the promised seed of the woman to finally arrive and crush the serpent's head. To understand the weight of that waiting, you have to look closer at the man who started the clock, because Adam's long centuries in the dust were not just a consequence, they were a pattern. He traces a line in the loose dirt with a dried stick. He is the first man to ever feel his own skin thin and wrinkle. Open the scroll to the 5th chapter of Genesis. Read the ledger. You will notice a rhythm. It is a drum beat. It is a rhythmic obituary. A man is born. He fathers a chosen son. He lives 800 and something years. And he dies. The phrasing is identical every time. Seth fathers Enosh, lives 807 years, and he died. Enosh fathers Kenan, lives 815 years, and he died. Mahalalel fathers Jared, lives 830 years, and he died. The heavy repetition is not an accident. The ancient Hebrew mind did not waste expensive parchment on redundant words. When a phrase repeats, it is bolded, underlined, and carved into the conceptual floorboards of the narrative. The author wants you to feel the sheer, crushing weight of the centuries. Look at the structure of the formula. First comes the birth of the named heir. Then comes the massive block of time. The 800 years always represent the aftermath. It is the era after the seed is planted, waiting for the harvest. Think about what that timeline actually means for the human experience. Adam watches the garden overgrow. He watches thorns strangle the soil. He watches Cain build the first city. He watches Lamech forge the first swords. The first to watch his hair turn white. The first to bury a murdered son in the ground. Adam is counting years. He watches the graves multiply. We read these massive numbers and envy their longevity. But the text is not describing a golden age of human vitality. It is describing an excruciating exile. The 800 years are not a reward for righteous living. They are an agonizing vigil. God does not immediately wipe the slate clean after Eden. He lets the disease run its course. He lets the violence escalate. He lets the human heart reveal exactly what it is capable of doing when separated from the source of life. The 8 centuries are the gestation period of human autonomy. They wait. They watch. They bury their dead. And every single time, the paragraph ends with the same heavy, rhythmic thud. And he died. And he died. And he died. It is a relentless cycle of delay and decay. But then you reach the 7th generation. You reach a man named Enoch. Enoch breaks the pattern. He does not live 800 years after his son is born. He walks with God, and God simply takes him. The text says he is no more. But before Enoch vanishes, he leaves something behind. He leaves a baby boy. And the name he gives this boy is not a standard tribal label. It is not a generic prayer for peace. The soil packed under his fingernails is cursed. The sweat drying on his brow is a daily reminder of a gate he can never walk back through. It is a prophetic detonator. And suddenly, the massive block of 800 years transforms from a passive period of waiting into a terrifying countdown. Enoch stands in the dust of a world that is rapidly forgetting its maker. He holds a newborn infant in his arms, feeling the fragile rise and fall of the boy's chest against his rough wool tunic. In the ancient Near East, you do not name a child simply because a word sounds beautiful. You name a child to declare a destiny. You name a child to stake a claim. In Genesis chapter 5, verse 21, Enoch looks at this baby, and he gives him a name that hangs over the rest of the chapter, like a dark, heavy storm cloud. He calls him Methuselah. In English, it just sounds like a piece of Sunday school trivia, the man who lived the longest. But the Hebrew name is Methushelach. And when you break that name down into its original roots, the boring genealogy suddenly turns into a thriller. The name is built from 2 distinct Hebrew words. The first is muth, which is the primitive root for death, or to die. The second is the verb shalach, which means to send, to bring forth, or to let loose. And he lives. He fathers Seth. And then, the text tells us, Adam lives exactly 800 years. It happens again. Seth fathers a son. It is the exact same verb shalach used just a few chapters later when Noah sends forth the dove from the window of the ark. When you combine those roots, the name carries a chilling, prophetic translation. Many linguistic scholars and ancient rabbinic traditions read Methuselah as a complete sentence. When he dies, it shall be sent. The name is not a mere identifier. It is a countdown. If something about these ancient names is suddenly stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the boy grows older. He learns to walk. He becomes a young man. And every single time he falls ill, every time he gets a fever or faces danger in the fields, the righteous remnant of his family must look up at the horizon and wonder if the sky is about to break open. God is tying the fate of the entire world to the heartbeat of one man. As long as Methuselah breathes, the flood is held back. God is pushing the boundaries of human biology to its absolute breaking point, extending this man's life to 969 years, simply to give a violent world one more day, one more month, one more decade to turn around, and lives 807 years. Enosh fathers a son, and lives 815 years. Cainan lives 840. His longevity is not a biological accident. It is the physical manifestation of God's mercy. But there is another piece of the puzzle here, a number shadowing Methuselah's family tree. His grandfather, Jared, lives out his own massive block of time, exactly 800 years after fathering Enoch. To understand why that specific number keeps anchoring these lives before the flood, you have to look at what the number 8 actually means in the Hebrew imagination. The ancient Hebrew mind did not view numbers as simple math. They viewed them as architecture. 7 is the number of completion. 7 days to form the mud. 7 days to pull back the dark water. 7 days to fill the empty sky with screaming birds and order the cosmos. But what happens when the 7th day is over? What happens when the cycle breaks? The Hebrew word for 8 is shemoneh. It is derived from the primitive root shaman, which means to make fat, to superabound, to overflow. Look at the rhythm of the biblical text. A baby boy sheds his first drops of blood in circumcision on the 8th day. A priest washes his skin, puts on the heavy linen garments, and enters the tabernacle on the 8th day. A man whose flesh was rotting from leprosy stands before the camp, clean and whole, on the 8th day. The pattern is not a cultural accident. Mahalalel lives 830, the same massive, heavy block of time, repeating rhythmically over the first pages of Scripture like a slow, terrifying drumbeat. It is a theological blueprint. 7 is the end of the old cycle. 8 is the violent, beautiful spark of the new one. 8 is the number of resurrection. It is the boundary line where the old world burns away and something completely unprecedented steps out of the ash. When Genesis records that Adam, Seth, Enosh, and their descendants lived exactly 800 years after fathering the promised seed, it is scaling up this concept to a terrifying degree. It is taking the 8th day and magnifying it across generations. It is not just 8 days. It is 8 centuries. The 800 years are not a random biological anomaly. They are a cosmic gestation period. The number is telling you exactly what is happening in the invisible realm. The world is overflowing its boundaries. The violence of Cain is superabounding. The earth is becoming heavy, fat with blood and corruption, stretching the fabric of creation until it is ready to tear. God is forcing the human race to sit in the tension of the 8th century. You can almost feel the weight of it pressing down on the patriarchs. They watch the storm clouds gather. They listen to the clashing of bronze swords in the valleys below. They smell the thick, choking smoke of burning cities. They are waiting for the overflow. They are waiting for the old world to die so a new one can be born. You've probably heard the debates. Most people read the 5th chapter of Genesis and they immediately turn it into a science equation. But before the sky can crack open, there is a physical threshold that must be crossed. There is one specific generation that stares the flood directly in the face. A man who pushes the number 800 to its absolute limit. Jared breathes his last. The 800 years are complete. The threshold is crossed. But the number does not drown in the floodwaters. It lies dormant for centuries. It waits in the text, until it resurfaces in the books of history. Erupting on a field of dirt and iron, a man stands alone in a valley of death. His hands are cramped so tightly around the shaft of a spear that his fingers will not unbend. The ground beneath his leather sandals is slick with blood. His lungs burn with the sharp, copper smell of the slain. His muscles tremble from the adrenaline of absolute slaughter. The book of 2 Samuel opens the ledger of King David's greatest warriors. And it begins with a man named Adino the Eznite. The text does not record his battle cries. It does not explain his military tactics. It does not list his armor. It only tells us his staggering, incomprehensible body count. He wields his spear against 800 men, and he kills them all. At one time, read that slowly. The math is impossible. The stamina is entirely inhuman. They assume these ages are either an ancient myth, or they build elaborate theories about a water canopy over the earth and hyper-oxygenated air. To swing a heavy weapon of wood and bronze 800 times? To deflect enemy blades? To break bone and pierce armor 800 times, without collapsing from sheer physical exhaustion, is a biological impossibility. But that is exactly why the author carves the number into the scroll. It is the exact same number that stalked the patriarchs in the dust of Genesis. It carries the exact same overwhelming, suffocating weight. Adam faced 8 centuries of a curse that refused to lift. Adino faces 800 armed men who refuse to retreat. For Adam and his sons, the 800 was an insurmountable stretch of time. For Adino the Eznite, the 800 is an insurmountable wall of flesh and iron. In both passages, the number 800 represents the absolute breaking point of human capacity. It is the violent boundary line where natural strength ends and divine intervention must take over. Adino does not survive the slaughter because he has the genetics of a giant. He survives because the Spirit of the Lord descends on the battlefield and turns a solitary soldier into an army. The lineage of Seth does not survive the ancient, violent world because they found a better way to cultivate the cursed ground. They survive because the Spirit of God is stubbornly, miraculously preserving a bloodline through the darkest era in human history.